2 years ago, I was doing zero running. And then a few months ago, I crossed the finish line of a 100-mile ultramarathon. And that's nuts. No one is more surprised about that than me, trust me. But today, I'm going to take you on my journey from booking that first ever ultramarathon to crossing that 100-mile finish line. I'd love to tell you it was all plain sailing and that there was this nice linear progression, but it wasn't. There were some wins and there were some losses along the way, but there were always some lessons. And that's what we'll go through today, so that hopefully you can either fast track your journey or at least not make the same mistakes I did. Let's get into it. So to be clear, 2 years ago, although I was doing zero running, I wasn't unfit. I was doing calisthenics, and that's bodyweight training, and I was using that to stay strong, and I was also making HIIT workouts with it as well. But what we'll find is that I had a huge aerobic deficiency. All of my training, when I was doing my cardio, was high intensity anaerobic work, and that became a problem further down the line. But then one day I was messaging a friend, and we decided that we wanted to have an adventure. And after a little bit of research, we landed on a race, Ultra Trail Snowdonia, a 50k mountain ultra marathon, and looking at some of the photos, it just made my heart sing. I knew that that's the race I wanted to do. The first thing I did was I bought the book The Uphill Athlete, and I read that, and it's all about endurance physiology and how to train, particularly for running in the mountains. And I realized that my entire life I'd been running wrong. Even though in the past, a few years before, I'd been a half decent runner. I could run a 5k in 18:30. I got there just by muscling it out. Pretty much every run I did, I ran as hard as I could, and I soon realized that was pretty stupid. If I wanted to be an ultra runner, I was going to have to be much more intelligent about how I went about my training. I learned that I had to do lots of aerobic base running, zone 2 running. I should also do some speed work, but the dose makes the medicine. The vast majority of my running became aerobic base, slow, easy running, and the speed work I dripped in, but I made sure I had good recovery the next day, and I didn't do too much of that. Having read the book, I was going to write my own plan, but there was one line in the book where they mentioned that the authors have a plan on training peaks, and I looked it up and I decided, who am I kidding? I should really trust the experts on this. And I'm so glad I did, because I learned a really valuable lesson. When you're training intelligently, you can cope with so much more volume than you think. There is no way I would have programmed as much volume as I was given. I wouldn't have trusted myself with it. But because they had structured the training in a really intelligent way that factored in intensity and rest and recovery, I managed to cope with it surprisingly well. I made a video about the exact training I was doing at that time, and I'll link that down in the description below. This led me to my first race, which was the most epic adventure. But being in the mountains and feeling fit and having trained so hard, I was like a kid in a candy shop, and I made all the rookie mistakes. I went out too fast, I hit the downhills too hard, I didn't manage my nutrition very well through the race, and that made the final third of the race utterly miserable. This was my first punch in the face lesson. What I learned was your training and your fitness is only a fraction of what will lead to success. Your race strategy and your nutrition are just as important. If I'd have managed my pacing, my nutrition better in that race, it would have turned out very differently. Fast forward a few months, and my friends had bullied me into booking my first ever 100-mile ultramarathon. This sounds crazy, having only done one 50k ultra at that point. I had 9 months to train for it, and I also knew, having immersed myself in the ultra community for a while, that really 100-mile ultras is my end game. So although I felt nervous and I'd been bullied into it, I also kind of wanted it. Prerequisite of the race was that I had to have done a 50-mile ultramarathon, which I hadn't done, so I had to book the Chester 50 as well. In the run-up to the Chester 50, my main focus was nutrition and race strategy. I had heard on a Rich Roll podcast an elite runner say that she goes out in her long ultras with a heart rate of 130 to 135 beats a minute. Then in the final 20% of the race, which is where most people are flagging, if she's got any energy left, that's where she really puts the pedal down. She was about the same age as me, so I kind of figured 130, 135 beats a minute would be a good place to aim at from a heart rate perspective. I'd also been paying attention to endurance nutrition research, and there was a study where they took people all the way up to 400 calories an hour and found that even at that high level, it wasn't dipping their performance, and if anything, it seemed to be improving their performance and improving their recovery. So I thought I'd give 300 to 400 calories an hour a go as a strategy. When I did that 50-miler, although it's always a tough day out when you're doing an ultramarathon, I was amazed at how well I could perform towards the end of the run and how well I felt the next day. I was bizarrely okay. This was such a huge difference to how I felt during the first ultra, so I knew I was onto something with this pacing and nutrition. I continued to be consistent with my training, and I kept reading and researching, and in the run-up to my first 100-miler, which was the South Downs Way 100, I felt confident going into it. But there were some things that went on before the race and during the race that didn't go my way, and I probably didn't have enough knowledge either, looking back in hindsight, and I had to pull out of that race. I didn't finish at 46 miles. I'll be honest, at the time, this hit me really hard, much harder than I was expecting. My wife and my kids came to pick me up from the race, and my conscious brain was telling me, this is what matters. My family, the people I love. What really doesn't matter is some silly race that I went off and do at the weekend. But subconsciously, I felt lost. I felt like pulling out of that race disturbed my identity. I really felt a bit down for a week or so, and I was moping around. But once the dust had settled, I realized, hang on a minute, what a joy it was, and what a great thing it was to bite off more than I could chew, to pick a challenge that had some uncertainty and in the end wasn't actually achievable on that day. With big goals, there is always a level of uncertainty around them. We might even say that is it even a challenge if there isn't any uncertainty? I came away realizing that that's how I want to live my life. It's okay to fail sometimes, but it's great to set big goals and find out where your boundaries are. How cool is that? I decided to leave ultra running for a while, and I just wanted to get strong again, so I got back into weightlifting. But then one fateful day, I walked into my local coffee shop, I got chatting to someone I know through the ultra running community, and I left that coffee shop having booked a 100-mile race around a running track. This time, I decided to put all of the lessons and the knowledge that I'd learned over the 18 months by that point into this race. They say that if you've got 5 hours to cut down a tree, you should spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. And for me, sharpening the axe was going back over my pacing strategy, my nutrition strategy, really being consistent with my training, but also managing my mindset. I went into this second 100-mile attempt prepared, rested, and ready to give it everything. I have a whole video about this race, but to summarize it briefly, it came in 3 chapters. The first chapter was the first 60 miles or so, and because I'd practiced a good pacing and nutrition strategy, it was surprisingly easy. The second chapter was the nighttime, and this is what I call the hard chapter. In fact, it became so hard that at 90 miles, I nearly quit. This sounds ridiculous saying it back in hindsight, but in my mind at the time, my mind was telling me that I am just not tough enough for this stuff. There are some people who are tough enough, and there are some people who aren't, and I am not tough enough for this. But getting so close to walking away and quitting, then the third chapter came. And this is the chapter that I'm calling the determined chapter. I realized that I wasn't giving it everything. I wasn't giving it my absolute best shot. And I decided to try harder. And an amazing thing happened. And I started to feel better. And then the sun rose and it turned into the most beautiful sunrise. And I managed to work my way towards crossing that godforsaken finish line. The line that I'd crossed 402 times before crossing it a 403rd and finishing the race. I cried on the finish line. It was such an emotional moment. And these things are emotional because it's not just the monumental effort you put into that race, but it's the months leading up to it, the years leading up to it, and it's the sacrifices, but it's also the sacrifices of the people around you, the sacrifices they make, and it becomes this really emotional moment, and I was just overwhelmed at the time. My biggest lesson though, hidden in all the struggle and all the beauty of that race, is that I was tough enough. And I'm here to tell you that you're tough enough too. I didn't feel tough though. I'm not David Goggins. During that race, my mind was telling me, you're not tough enough. My mind was telling me I'm stupid for trying. I felt weak, but I was tough enough. People say that ultra running is a mental game, and they are right. It is. But what they don't tell you is that in the moment, it feels physical. Your physical body will be in pain. Your physical body will feel like it's at its limit. Your body will tell you all these logical and sensible reasons why you can't go on, and it will feel like the truth. The mental game is to realize that if you can put one foot in front of the other, you should put one foot in front of the other. I know that is such a cliche, but now I have this visceral attachment to that feeling. Having been through it, I know it's true. And I'm here to tell you that you can do it too. You are tough enough too. To see the exact training I did in the run up to my first ultra, I will leave that video here. And until next time, happy training.